If people are able to become other genders, or simply are genders other than the ones they are assigned at birth, or can determine their own genders, then yeah, they can determine that at any age. Yeah, Michael Knowles is advocating for genocide. Hope that wasn't out of left field, but that's a thing we got to talk about. I know I already did a video on this, but that was when we covered Michael Knowles in his studio, advocating for genocide. Undiagnosed ADHD moment. I am undiagnosed. I don't have healthcare. I can't go get a diagnosis. We covered Michael Knowles talking about genociding trans people already, where he made the argument that you can't genocide trans people because trans people don't exist. That was a thing he tried to do. Okay, cool. Did you know that he did this more than once? Because he went to CPAC, which is the conservative convention, basically. Think of Dragon Con, but with, you know, old fat white people who don't like kids. That's CPAC, functionally. Let's go ahead and take a listen to what he says over there. But first, let's get into the fan art section. This one is from Botar. Said, in one of your recent videos, you mentioned how it warms your heart when people say Suris fan art got them out of an art block. These fan arts I've done is something of the first digital art I've done in months. I don't know why, but sometimes after first seeing you on Atheist Experience, your character really inspired me. I want to thank you for your vids and aesthetic. So, have this massive Black Hole Chan, Tiny Suris included. So we have Black Hole Chan here, and then a focus on the whittle Tiny Suris staring up at the giant black hole. You know, it's funny. There's a reason the black hole is now even in Dumpy's domain. She's everywhere now. She's everywhere. The next one we have here is from Emerichik. I came across the channel recently, and I'm loving the content. I drew a Neko Slime Suris. This is the first drawing after a 1.5 year break, and the first time I've used colored pencils as the main medium in over 3 years. Holy shit! Guys, I know that a person literally said it in their comment on the last thing, but I'm really happy when I see artists get out of an art block and they literally just go like, yeah, no, it was the channel that did it. Like, watching your channel did it for me. That was the thing that made me get out of the art block. That was the thing that helped. That's insane to me. Like, knowing that this channel, this little corner on the internet we've carved out, is able to actually, like, do that kind of stuff for people, that's insane. And it just fills me with fucking joy. It really does. That said, as always, everybody, thank you all for the fan art submissions. Let's go ahead and get right into the topic at hand, because Mikey boy, he's got some words.
There can be no middle way in dealing with transgenderism. It is all or nothing. If transgenderism is true, if men really can become women, then it's true for everybody of all ages.
Yeah? That somebody identifies outside of their gender, then yeah, that's true for everybody. If thing is true, then thing is true. Yeah, no, look at the amazing circular reasoning. So, you're right. If people are able to become other genders, or simply are genders other than the ones they are assigned at birth, or can determine their own genders, then yeah, they can determine that at any age. We can take on a lot of identities at any age. A person can call themselves a gamer, or a bookie, or a movie buff. They can take on all of these identities at any age. Now, whether those identities stick with them, we don't know. There's a small fraction of people who believe they are a different gender as a kid and then grow up to not really feel that way anymore. But the converse of that is that, yes, there are people who believe they are a different gender as a kid and maintain that all the way into adulthood. So, yeah, at any age. Even people like Blair White, who are some of the most vocal people in the anti-trans Republican side of things, whilst also somehow, paradoxically, being trans, even people like Blair White have pointed out publicly that, yes, they knew at the age of 5. Like, she knew she was trans at the age of 5. That was how early she figured that out. I don't remember if it was Joe Rogan's podcast or Louder with Crowder or where she said that. But it's a thing, right? Like, yeah, people can take on identities at other ages. Let's see where he goes with this.
If transgenderism is false, as it is, if men really can't become women, as they cannot, then it's false for everybody too. And if it's false, then we should not indulge it.
Okay, so, Michael, it's really weird to me to have to dust off the Trilby fedora. We're just going to call it both so that people in the comment section don't mention it. You can say this for anything. I can even say this about various religious beliefs. I can. Like, this is not a particular line of argumentation you want to go down. But again, this is also not even really a line of argumentation. This is literally somebody saying, if X is true, then X is true. Wow! Holy shit! What riveting philosophical discussions!
Especially since that indulgence requires taking away the rights and customs of so many people.
So what rights and customs are taken away by accepting trans people are valid, or just accepting that they're a part of society? What rights are taken away? The arguments I usually hear are women's spaces become less women-y, but trans people make up less than 1% of the United States population, which means by that logic, by that number, if you've got a room filled with 30 people, maybe one of them is trans in a woman's space. Maybe. 2 if you're lucky. Nobody's taking anything away there, and there's such a statistically small amount of those people anyway that they're not really changing the dynamics of your space that much. Oh no, you had to accept a couple of trans people into your group at the bar. Who cares? I play card games at card shops. I have to accept uncomfortable people all the time around my play spaces because it's a mixed play space with multiple people, some of which I don't like, some of which I just have to tolerate. That's the nature of being in a public space. You won't like everyone. And that's really what this boils down to. It's not that trans people are any more or less dangerous than the average person. It's that they make you uncomfortable. But your uncomfortability is never really a good argument in and of itself. Now, there is an argument to be made that people who are born male statistically have a higher proclivity for things like violence, things like sexual assault, as far as we know, when it comes to reported numbers. And the only thing we can really work on is reported numbers. I know that the numbers are not as skewed in just men's side of things as they look like on paper, though, because the rate of reporting people who are born female assaulting men is lower than it should be, because there's a stigma against it. Like, there's people who never want to be the guy who got attacked by a woman. Like, that's a thing we need to work on in society, is try to make it to where toxic masculinity, which one aspect of that is not admitting if a woman beat you the fuck up, we need to figure out a way to solve that. But just working with the numbers, there is a belief that is fairly valid that there is a likelihood that a guy is going to assault you. And these people see trans women as men. They don't see them as women. Now, the reality of things is trans women get assaulted at a pretty high fucking rate. So while these people should be allies against the idea of sexual assault in their spaces, instead they try to gatekeep out their spaces. It's a very weird phenomenon. I can understand where it comes from, but it doesn't make it valid. It doesn't make it logical. It's literally from top to bottom an emotional response to prejudice. You are prejudiced against guys for good or bad reasons, and you are prejudiced against trans people, which leads you to believe that trans women are guys, and then that prejudice leads you to take these actions against trans women. But women's spaces is like the only argument I ever hear about people losing their rights to trans people. I've heard people talk about like trans people in sports and like, oh my god, I'm losing my right to win a sport, but no, your right to win a sport is based entirely on how much you train. And after HRT, even the Olympics has agreed that now, once you're on HRT for about a year or so, your biology, the chemical makeup inside you has been changed significantly to where it mirrors what you would expect to a very, very close percentile degree to people who are born in the gender that you are transitioning to. So I don't accept either of these arguments. I don't accept the sports one, and I don't accept the women's spaces one, because those two arguments have super easy defeaters, as I've already explained here. One is based entirely on prejudice, and the other one is literally ascientific. So what we have then is, I can't think of any rights that are being taken away. I mean, maybe if somebody in the comments section could let me know what rights are being taken away from that. Also, Zavi says, if a man who has been through puberty, if they go on HRT, do they not have an advantage? Not a statistically significant one. So what was found during the studies that the Olympics did was that testosterone as a chemical in the body is something that it's now something that is measured even for their cis athletes. There are cis athletes who were born female and have an advantage. Despite going through female puberty, they have an advantage based on the testosterone in their body over other people. And so they have to take basically HRT that will lower their testosterone levels to that of the expected levels for the other competitors. This is the thing that has happened with our Olympics. So the reason that they do that is because we found that when your testosterone levels have been reduced significantly and your estrogen levels have been increased over the course of a year, the makeup of your body, you lose things like muscle mass. It is very, very common. It is almost always expected that trans women will lose muscle mass during the process of transitioning with HRT. The variance, I think the last time I looked at the papers, the variance was like about a 6% over and below for trans people versus cis people here, which is also the amount of variance that you find with cis people that were born, cis women that were born with higher levels of testosterone. Which means if we have to allow cis people with higher levels of testosterone after they've gone on supplements to lower their testosterone levels, then you also have to allow the trans women to go in. While it is a little stupid to make cis people suppress their hormones, that's just how being a natural athlete works. Like, I understand that point, but the fact of the matter is this is the position that the Olympics Committee rested on, was that hormone levels needed to be regulated, and this allows trans people and cis people to both compete in these competitions. But the takeaway from that is that we know that those hormone levels have such an effect now on athletes, on regular, everyday-ass people, that when they're accounted for, when you're on HRT, when we can measure those levels and when we can say, hey, no, the chemical makeup in your body, the parts that matter in terms of your athleticism, they're basically 1-to-1 as far as we're concerned with cis women. And that's as far as I care. I don't care anymore at that point. Oh, I didn't know that. I guess I just always saw the big guys who are trans, but that makes sense. No, so that's the thing, like, trans men, when they go on their HRT, when they are getting their supplements also, they can increase muscle mass quite a bit. Because, again, that's what HRT is doing. You are benefiting from the chemical wash makeup in your body that you would have if you were the gender that you identify as. That's what HRT does. That's its goal. And the most important factor in a person's makeup there is going to come down to that chemical wash, that biology. That same logic would mean that men who have low testosterone are allowed to take tea until they match the average guy. Again, this is just how they ended up doing shit. There were a couple incidents where cis people actually had cis women actually had very, very invasive events that happened at the Olympics because people thought they were trans. Like, that happened in the course of coming to a conclusion where this is all concerned. I don't have the name of the person offhand that this happened to, but it's I did a video on it, I think like 4 years ago or so. It's an oldie one. But this is the reason why, like, I don't buy the women's spaces, the women's sports, like all this shit. I don't buy it. One, the people who make these arguments typically didn't give a shit about these spaces until they could bash trans people with the argument. But two, the arguments just kind of fall flat on their face. Like, when you look at the research that's been done into this, it's a giant non-issue. And don't even get me started on the rates of sexual assault when trans women are forced to always be in men's spaces. That's a yikers. That's one that we learned during the initial bathroom debate. But let's go ahead and see here.
If it is false, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level.
So that's a call for genocide. And I'm not going to make any bones about it. I'm not going to play devil's advocate here. I'm not going to sit here and try to meander around it. No, I'm going to use a couple of social categories. And I'm going to throw those social categories at you, and you tell me if they sound like genocide. 1, we need to eradicate homosexuality. Does that sound like a call for genocide against homosexual people, yes or no? You let me know in the comment section. You let me know in the chat. This is a call to eradicate Christianity. Does that sound like a call to eradicate all Christians? Let me know in the comment section below. Let me know here in the chat. This is a call to eradicate all feminism. Does that sound like a call to eradicate feminists? Let me know in the comment section below. Now, my answer to all of those is yes. Every single one of those sounds like a call to eradicate those people, because how do you eliminate an ideology? You can't. It is impossible to eliminate an ideology. People can be killed, ideas cannot be killed, which means you're left with eliminating the people who have that ideology. Now, that's why I'm okay saying things like, let's fight back against Nazism. Let's try to eliminate Nazi ideology. I'm okay with those ideas in and of themselves. But you also have to understand that there's a difference here. Trans ideology, trans people, they're not going to just not be trans. They're not going to just not be trans. You're not going to be able to eliminate that ideology. You're not. With something like Nazism, that's a core belief that can be eliminated. It can be changed. Religiosity is something that in some people can't be changed because their ideas about God can be so ingrained into their identity as people, far more ingrained than any political ideology would, that you can't separate that from a person. It can happen. It's a reason why a lot of people who break away from harmful conservative Christianity, the way that the NIFB has it, still might end up being Christians or still might end up being religious in some way. There's a lot of ideas about the afterlife and your personal worth as a person that are just locked there. They're not going anywhere. Things like Nazism, though, that's a quantifiable bit of data. You can eliminate a handful of ideas in a person, and they are no longer a Nazi. There is a functional path to eliminating Nazism that doesn't involve killing a bunch of people. There is no functional path to eliminating transgenderism that does not involve killing a bunch of people. There is no functional path to eliminating Christianity, Islam, Judaism, that does not involve killing the people who have those ideologies, because they are so core to those people. Some for religious reasons, and some for reasons of, I don't know how many times I have to tell you gender identity is an ingrained part in people. I don't know how I can tell you that. If I said we have to eliminate cisness in society, that would sound like I'm calling for the elimination of people like me, for instance. You cannot have this both ways. You cannot do the, oh, I'm talking about eliminating the ideology, that's it. It's not a call for genocide, when you realize that people like Adolf Hitler did the exact same thing. And I'm not even talking about Jews. I'm not talking about that right now. Some of the precursors to the Holocaust was the elimination of public gayness. Being gay in public was illegalized. Public gayness was one of the things that was taken out by the Nazi Party before the genocide of the Jews commenced in full, the way we understand it, from the Holocaust. So I don't know how to explain to you, I don't know how to point out to you that this is what a genocide looks like. These are what the early stages of a genocide look like, because this is how they looked before World War II, and this is how they look almost all the time. Genocide is a thing that takes 10 steps. There are 10 steps to a genocide. Once you start calling for the elimination of that ideology, once you start that bit of religiosity, that bit of that gender, that whatever it is, that is not just an idea that can be divorced from a person, it's a call for genocide. That's what that is. Because everybody in that audience, how do you think they think we're going to eliminate transgenderism. How do you think they want to eliminate transgenderism? Do you think it's going to be sitting down and debating with people every single day, all the time? Or are they going to literally think about the fact that they call transgender people groomers and they're going to think that it's a defense of the children that they care so much about to attack those trans people? Which do you think is going to happen? Which do you think is going to happen? I don't have to ask you that, because some of the books burned in Nazi Germany were books on trans people and books on the experience of being gay. I don't have to tell you what direction this can go in, because we have historical precedent for what direction it can go in. Now, it should also be noted, it's very important to remember, it's very important to recognize, genocides can be stopped. Genocide may be a multi-step process, but there is nothing saying that a genocide doesn't stop at one of those steps. So before you go all doom and gloom and start worrying like, what's all going to happen in the United States? Am I going to be safe? Blah, 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 blah. I understand all of that. I get it. I'm just as fucking terrified because there are people that I love dearly that are trans, and I want to make sure that they are safe as possible. For your own mental, remember, genocides can be stopped. All you have to ask yourself is, how do we do that? Us, in our position, one of the best ways we can do that is education. Right now, one of the best ways forward is education. We don't want it's going to be with violence, so we need to eliminate conservatives with the same response. Marissa, I will literally ban you. No, you do not call for a counter-genocide. I'm sorry. No. That's not a thing you're going to do in my chat. And that's not something that I want anybody to do. There's a reason I brought up the Nazi ideology thing. There's a reason I did that. A Nazi's ideas about the world can be changed. There are literal examples of that in my audience. I know this because I get emails from you guys. I get DMs in Twitter and Discord from you guys with testimonials about the ideology that you had and how far you've come watching my channel. And that means the world to me, seeing that journey that people are able to go on, knowing that that's a thing that people are capable of. It gives me hope in the fucking world. Right now, the goal is education. This is why I've been focusing so much content not on just debunking right-wing nut jobs who go into their punditry and talk about how bad trans people are and how they're groomers, but I also make sure to point out that it's a grift. There's a reason why I spend so much time pointing out that this is what these people do for money. Because the minute you recognize that, that's the minute you start scrutinizing everything they say. If you know somebody has a financial incentive to say the thing that they do, to say what they are saying, I love when VTube Studio crashes. It's my favorite. I love VTube Studio crashing. It's my favorite. But the minute that you recognize that somebody is doing something for financial gain, the likelihood of you scrutinizing everything they say gets higher. And I don't need to sit here and explain to you the statistical advantage of converting somebody to your side, of taking somebody who used to have that ideology and moving them over to your side. Because you gain so much more than just with elimination. If I were to look at this from a cold, hard perspective, elimination versus education. Elimination lowers the amount of numbers on their side. Education lowers the amount of numbers on their side and also increases the amount on your side. More importantly, adding to that, education as opposed to elimination lets you learn more about that other side. And the more you know about the rhetoric that conservatives are using in their in-groups, in their echo chambers, in their confirmation bias bubbles, the more you learn about how they are operating, the better you will be at countering their rhetoric on an individual basis. And every individual that is moved over from the right into, I don't even care if it's all the way to the left, I just care that they're not arguing for genocide at this point. Every single person you move over from that position is one more person who can move more people from that position over, because they've been there, they've lived it, they've done it. And I can guarantee you that half of the people who want to call specifically for violence or elimination of the other side as anything other than the last fucking possible resort, I guarantee you almost every single one of you had your own anti-SJW phase. I guarantee you almost every single one of you had your own bit of time where you weren't progressive or you were apolitical enough to where you were willing to make jokes at trans people's expense without actually thinking about the consequences of that. I guarantee you, every single... Hell, there's probably people in the audience now that still do that. Every one of you. Nobody's perfect, and people change. You want to see less Michael Knowles and Ben Shapiro's? You deplete their audience. You deplete their audience. A punditry only works as long as they've got people who are willing to listen to them. That's it. That's the magic formula. That's what you do. But that's where I end that. Let me know in the comment section what you think. Maybe even talk about your journey. But I want you to understand, for multiple reasons, violence advocacy doesn't get us anywhere. Violence is a tool. It's a tool that we have access to, and it's a tool that I hope we never have to use. Shouting for it from the rooftops ain't gonna help, and it's certainly not going to help you deplete the audience numbers for those people, because that's also how you make martyrs. But with that said, guys, as always, insert end of video tagline here.